to the delirious delight of his countrymen. It's the best thing that could possibly have happened for Grand Prix racing.
The sound of glass shattering and crunching metal still haunts me. This has to be the most horrific crash I have ever seen. The closer you are to death, the more alive you feel, but more powerful than fear itself is the desire to win. James Hunt. A string of fatalities, safety car appearances, fire marshals to the rescue, and a death that nearly ended F1 global phenomenon. Ayrton Senna was more than just a Formula One driver. He was a legend, a hero, and a symbol of excellence.
He is in Brazil, he's in my heart, he always has.
Senna was widely regarded as one of the greatest drivers of all time, and one of the most influential sportsmen in history. The death of Ayrton Senna shocked a nation and a worldwide sporting community. People who did not follow the sport were still affected by this terrible news. He won 3 worldwide championships, 41 races, and 65 pole positions. He also inspired millions of fans around the world with his talent, charisma, courage, and generosity. But on May 1st, 1994, Senna's life and career came to an abrupt and tragic end. He died after his car crashed into a concrete barrier while driving the San Marino Grand Prix at the Imola circuit in Italy. His death shocked and saddened the world and changed Formula One forever. Senna began his F1 career in 1984 with Toleman, and Senna's raw talent was evident from the start. In 1988, he joined McLaren and won 3 world titles, making him one of the biggest names in the sport. In 1994, he joined Williams, an experience full of promise, but also a challenge, as he had to deal with a very different car to his McLaren. The 1994 San Marino Grand Prix was the 3rd race of the season. Senna did not finish the first 2 races of the season. He said this is where his season begins. This weekend will always be remembered as one of the darkest in F1 history. Events began with a serious crash involving Rubens Barrichello, followed by the death of rookie driver Roland Ratzenberger during qualifying. On Saturday, Roland Ratzenberger died after crashing into a wall at high speed during qualifying. Visibly shaken by these events, Senna told his girlfriend that he did not want to race on Sunday. These incidents set a somber tone for race day. Despite his fears, Senna decided to race, and he took pole position for the 13th time in a row. He's determined to win his first race of the season after 2 disappointing results with his new Williams team. Senna is under considerable pressure in the race at Imola. He is new to Williams and still trying to find his feet. In McLaren, he's treated as the only child of a large family. In Williams, he's an unknown and just a new employee of a corporate structure. He was also keen to challenge his main rival, Benetton's Michael Schumacher, winner of the first 2 races and the champion leadership. The race started under a safety car due to a crash at the start. When the safety car came onto the track, Senna quickly pulled away from Schumacher, setting the fastest lap of the race. However, on the 7th lap while approaching Tamburello Curve, one of the fastest and most dangerous of the circuit, his car suddenly left the track and hit a concrete barrier at around 306 kilometers per hour. Senna's Williams left the track just after the apex of the curb at a speed of 305 kilometers per hour and crashed into an unprotected concrete retaining wall. The right front of the car took the brunt of the impact. A wheel came loose, the suspension collapsed, and Williams was catapulted onto the track. In the split second before the car hit the wall, Senna was able to slow down to 103 miles per hour. The monocoque remained intact, and a slight movement of Senna's head gave brief reasons for hope, but he suffered serious head injuries. Senna suffered 3 serious head injuries as a result of the crash. The first was caused by the screeching of a wheel hitting his helmet, violently pushing his head into the headrest. Also, a loose part of the suspension managed to penetrate his helmet. As if that wasn't enough, part of the vertical mountain pierced the visor of his helmet. Any of these 3 injuries could be fatal. The seriousness of the accident became clear when Senna was immobilized. There was a glimmer of hope when his head momentarily lifted to the left, but that hope was dashed when he returned to his original position. Seconds after the accident, firefighters came to Senna's car, but were not told to touch it until help arrived. A few minutes later, Senna was carefully removed from the car and given medical attention. His obvious head injuries were clear indicators of mass trauma, although the exact extent of the damage was unclear at this point. Professor Sid Watkins, who was serving as medical director at the time, quickly arrived on the scene. He performed a series of crucial actions to save Senna's life, including clearing the airway, stopping the flow of blood, replenishing lost blood, and immobilizing the cervical region. Millions of viewers were able to see the aerial footage of the car, which was bleeding like oil. Senna was pulled from the wreckage and transported to Maggiore Hospital. On board, doctors worked to revive Senna's heart. The impact was devastating. The right front wheel and the suspension parts were detached from the car and struck Senna's helmet, causing severe head injuries. The car stopped at the side of the track, with Senna still inside. Many said they saw movement, but this was attributed to muscle spasms. Unfortunately, the helicopter view of the car showed a large red stain of blood on his racing suit. Perhaps the reason why the track marshals did not attend to Ayrton until the medical team arrived. Minutes later, the medical team pulled Senna out of the car and began treatment, including an emergency tracheotomy. Of course, it was F1 Dr. Sid Watkins, Senna's friend, who looked after Senna, and he famously said he looked calm. I lifted my eyelids, and it was clear from his pupils that he had massive brain injury. We lifted him out of the cabin and put him on the ground. As he did so, he sighed, and although I am not religious, I felt his spirit leave at that moment. He was transported to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead a few hours later. Schumacher showed his exceptional skills and strategic acumen throughout the race, eventually taking an unforgettable victory. WION reported that an Italian court ruled that a break in a hastily assembled steering column in Ayrton Senna's Williams caused the crash. Adrian Newey, the famous F1 engineer who helped design the car, wrote in his 2017 autobiography, "Whether the steering column caused the incident or not, it cannot be denied that this was a piece of poor design that should never be allowed in the car." Newey also said that the most tragic accident in F1 in the history of the sport was related to the instability of Williams. According to First Sports, Ayrton Senna's accident happened on the 7th lap of the race at the Tamburello curve. He was going through the corner at a high speed when the Brazilian driver left the line at 307 km per hour, 191 miles per hour due to a problem. It hit a concrete wall at a speed of 233 km per hour, 145 miles per hour. Additionally, telemetry revealed that the highly skilled driver applied the brake for 2 seconds before hitting the wall. Senna was still alive at the scene with a weak heartbeat. He had suffered significant blood loss due to a ruptured temporal artery. He died later that evening. FIA medical director Sid Watkins confirmed that Ayrton Senna's pupils were completely dilated, suggesting that his brain was inactive. According to reports, a piece attached to the right front of the wheel penetrated his helmet and left a huge mark on his forehead. He suffered fatal injuries, including skull fractures, brain damage, and a ruptured temporal artery. In his 2017 autobiography, How to Build a Car, Newey explains that Senna had requested before the weekend that the position of the steering wheel would be changed slightly to prevent his joints from rubbing against the inside of the chassis. To make up the difference, the steering column had been modified. Italian law says that unless a death is ruled a suicide, someone must be held responsible. As a result, prosecutors have initiated legal proceedings against 6 people related to the accident. 3 of them were from the Williams team: owner and founder Frank Williams, technical director and co-founder Patrick Head, and chief designer Adrian Newey, as well as Federico Bandinelli, representing the track owners, circuit director Giorgio Poggi, and the race director Roland Bruinsered. The issue dragged on for years, and at one point, F1 threatened to stop the Grand Prix from being held in the country. In December 1997, owner Frank Williams and several other team members, including technical director Patrick Head and chief designer Adrian Newey, were fired. The Italian Supreme Court reopened the case in 2003, and it closed on May 2005, with Newey fully acquitted. Finally, in April 2007, the sentence number 15050 stated it was established that the accident was caused by a defect in the steering column. This failure was caused by poorly thought out and poorly executed modifications. The result is Patrick Head, guilty of failure of control. However, Head was not arrested and the case was eventually dismissed, as the statute of limitations for murder in Italy was only 7 years and 6 months. Williams denied responsibility for the crash and claimed the steering column broke after the crash and not before. Could that be real? They also argued for many other factors that may have contributed to the accident, such as tire pressure or aerodynamics. Many experts and witnesses supported his version of events. Senna's teammate Damon Hill felt that Senna made a rare mistake by trying too hard to stay ahead of Schumacher. He said Senna looked nervous and tense before the race, and saw him lose control of his car in a crash before the corner. Schumacher, who was following Senna closely at the time of the crash, also said he noticed something unusual in Senna's car before it left the track. No definitive answer was given. It could be a combination of factors that led to a fatal outcome. What is certain is that it was one of the most tragic moments in the history of Formula One. His death sent shockwaves not only in motorsports, but in the world of sports in general. For Brazilians, Senna's death was a national tragedy that the government declared 3 days of mourning for. A state funeral was held in Sao Paulo a few days later, drawing in more than 500,000 people to the streets. When Brazil won the FIFA World Cup later that year, the team dedicated a banner to Senna. Brazil mourned Senna's death with immense sadness and emotion. According to some estimates, more than 3 million people gathered in the streets of Sao Paulo to pay their respects as his coffin was transported from the airport to the cemetery. His funeral was attended by dignitaries, celebrities, and other pilots, and was broadcast live on national television. The entire country observed 3 days of official mourning, and many public events were cancelled or postponed. Senna's death also sparked a wave of tributes around the world. Many drivers, teams, and fans wore black wristbands or stickers bearing their name or initials. Many races have also been dedicated to his memory, and some circuits have been named or sections after him. Many songs, books, films, documentaries, and works of art have been created to honor his legacy. His foundation, which he created shortly before his death to help children and youth in need, has received millions of dollars in donations. Senna is buried in Morumbi Cemetery in Sao Paulo. The epitaph of his graph reads, "Nothing can separate me from the love of God." In French, it means, "Nothing can separate me from the love of God." Senna's death led to a new interest in safety in Formula One. His legacy is not only in the records he set, but also in the safer racing conditions than today's drivers. The Ayrton Senna Foundation, established in his memory, continues to support educational initiatives for disadvantaged children in Brazil. From this darkest weekend came an abundance of light. As tragic as it was, Senna's death was not in vain. This decision resulted in the largest regulatory review in the history of the discipline in the name of security. Over the next few years, new aerodynamic rules were introduced in an attempt to slow down the cars. Suspension modifications have also been put in place to reduce the risk of wheel failure in the event of an accident. This event led to the introduction of high-strength pulley belts. The sides of the cockpit were also raised to protect the pilot's head. The dimensions of the passenger compartments have also changed. Foam supports have been also introduced to mitigate some of the impact in the event of a crash. The minimum requirements for crash tests have also been increased, but cars aren't the only thing that have changed. The FIA also introduced new rules regarding the construction of circuits. The clearances have been modified, and new technologies have been developed to create energy dissipation barriers in the case of a serious accident. At Imola, new chicanes were built at Tamborilla and Villanova. And for the pilots themselves, only one racer lost his life in a modern F1 car since Senna, Jules Bianchi, after a horrific crash involving a recovery tractor on track in typhoon conditions during the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix, which also led to a review of how major matches are broadcast on the global network. Never again will we be able to broadcast the image of a pilot with obvious serious injuries in a loop. No replay was ever broadcast of Bianchi's crash, and to date, no official video has released. Much of what is in cars today was probably unimaginable then, as car safety will be for 30 years. The important thing is to always learn lessons from every serious accident. Imola has a permanent memorial to Senna outside the circuit near Tamborello. The circuit was open to the public for walks and a commemoration was held. A similar event took place at the Sao Paulo circuit, home of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Senna's death played a huge role in the history of F1. F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali told Racing News 365. Senna's influence in terms of security has been great. After his death, the FIA made major changes that made the sport safer. Senna's legacy in this field is great. On the one hand, it's annoying for Imola that people still remember this tragic moment, but on the other hand, from a historical point of view, the incident is huge. It will always remind us of what changed afterward. The death of Ayrton Senna marked a turning point in the world of Formula One. Although his death was tragic, his legacy lives on both on and off the tracks. As fans and enthusiasts, we remember him not only for the way he competed, but also for the passion and dedication he brought to the sport.